Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm Elias Baltasis. I'm a partner with BCG, with the Boston Consulting Group. I'm a member of Gamma. Gamma is our artificial intelligence practice. And I have here the pleasure to moderate a panel that will discuss how we unlock value from artificial intelligence. I'm here together with Hissa and Arnaud. Hissa is from SCAI, and Arnaud is an investor in artificial intelligence. I will let them present themselves. Hissa? Try again.
There is always a technical issue. Yeah. Can you hear me? I think you can hear me now. So good morning, everyone. Sorry for the technical issue. I'm Hassan Nif.
It doesn't work very well. Can you hear it? Keep it close.
Can you hear me now? Okay, so I will have to shout the whole session. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. It has been an exciting morning, and I hope we will get very inspired in the next few days. I'm delighted to be here with two distinguished speakers and experts in our industry. I work for SCAI, the Saudi company for artificial intelligence, where we focus on helping our clients and the organization in unlocking value with AI, which will be the main topic of today. Again, thank you very much for joining the session today, and I hope we will all together learn something new from our discussion. Thank you for you.
Arnaud.
Can you hear me okay? No? Thank you, Elias. Good morning, everyone. I'm very glad to be here. I'm Arnaud Barthélémy. I'm the partner and COO of a venture capital fund called Alpha Intelligence Capital, which we created 4 years ago. And AIC is specialized in AI companies. So we do invest only in AI-related companies, and by AI, we mean AI. So it's really self-learning decision-making engines. It's quite specific. And that goes with being global, right? If you are really looking after deep tech AI companies, you need to have a global deal flow, which is what we try to do. So we have invested so far into 28 companies in the US, in Europe, of course, in Asia, and a bit in the Middle East as well. Our first fund is almost fully deployed. And yesterday, actually, we did the first closing of a new fund. So we are happy that we are again in a position to invest and to contribute to the development of AI. But again, very happy to be here. And I guess I should pass the floor back to you, Elias.
Okay, so we'll start with saying, as I was telling you, I'm part of BCG Gamma. BCG Gamma is probably the largest group, at least in the consulting world, that works on AI. We are more than 2,000 people. And we do a lot of research. And I wanted to share with you some numbers. What you see there, I'll try to present it in a relatively simple way. Every 2 years, we do a research on the state of AI. It has more than 1,500 companies around the world, and so on and so forth. And we ask them several questions. There are more than 50 criteria, and so on and so forth. And we ask them, where do you see yourself being in 3 years? And the black bars you see there is the replies. You know, the index we calculate goes from 0 to 500. And for instance, in 2016, they said that in 3 years, we will be above 400. When we checked it, actually, they were barely at 270. So they had overestimated their target by 30%. In the next issue of this, we checked again. There were already organizations and companies a bit more reasonable. They said we'll be a bit below 400, But even that, they missed it. They missed it by more than 20%. But at least you see the gap starts changing. So two conclusions here. The first one is that every time we make plans on where we want to go with AI, we overestimate. But there is a learning effect. Little by little, we start becoming better into this. Next year, we'll have the results of this time, so we'll see how that works. Now, what are the mistakes that company makes? And I will give a few examples. You know, there are many of them. One of this is this fishbowl thing. We hired a bunch of genius, we gave them a big machine and data, but nothing happens. Some companies believe that, you know, just hiring a few geniuses or just hiring a data science group is enough to do artificial intelligence. Unfortunately, it's not. Then we have the rotten banana. Our data is crap, is all over the place, is dispersed, it's in silos, we cannot do everything about it. And the companies who say this exactly, they don't do anything about it. They don't try to improve the situation. Another thing is the spaghetti code. We write code so difficult that when we give it to IT to implement, nobody knows how to implement it. Or this one is one of my favorites one. You know, we start into technology, it stays forever. We spend 3 years or 2 years on technology, and when we finalize the technology, you know, we don't see any benefit because, of course, we haven't done anything of the other factors that is needed. This is one of my absolute favorite. One chief executive officer here in Riyadh a few weeks ago was telling me very proudly, oh, we're going full throttle in AI. We have more than 70 initiatives going on. That's exactly that. 70 initiatives, unless you are the size of Google, it's too much. Nobody can follow 70 initiatives. Nobody can focus on 70 initiatives, and you have exactly this phenomenon. Mosquitoes never manage to move the mammoth. You need to focus and to concentrate your efforts. Then we have that. Yeah, we'll have a fantastic model, but nobody understands it. It's black magic. And this is one of the most important ones. What you see there, it's a real car made by Bertoni. Bertoni used to be an independent company, now it's a subsidiary of Fiat. That is this fantastic car, but of course Fiat cannot produce it at scale. So what happens very often, since we do some fantastic POCs, fantastic proof of concept, but then it's impossible to scale them. In something that does not scale, it's useless. So I'll pass it to Hussein to tell us how they see some of the major challenges.
Thank you very much, Elias. So I will echo what Elias has been mentioning in terms of the mistakes that usually organizations fall into while trying to adapt or create an AI project. One of the major challenges and mistakes is that when we think of AI, we always think about the technology itself, how we're going to invest, how we're going to bring the best algorithms, as Elias mentioned, bringing the best brilliant data scientists, but sometimes they forget about the data, which is the fuel for AI. Always when we start the AI projects, we are going to be faced with multiple challenges when it comes to the data complexity, the data quality. For example, I will share with you one of the use cases that I have been working on in the past in the predictive maintenance field, where we were using sensors as an input to create the data for the model. The model performed very well in the POC stage and the MVP stage, but once it was moved into production, we had a huge, let's say, a drop of the accuracy of the model itself. And the reason for that is that the sensor that was creating the data was not reliable. So your model is going to be as good as the data that is being fed into. And as the old saying, garbage in and garbage out, but it's a very important sentence to have in mind. So always when we start the AI project, we need to make some thinking around the investment of AI, but also we need to think about the investment that we need to make in terms of the data. So, for example, we think about how we're going to collect the data from the current data sources, but why do we have to limit ourselves to only the data sources within the organization and the databases? We can think of creating data beyond what the organization has, and sometimes even the best feature is not yet within the organization. So the concept of not just extracting the data rather than creating the data with an intent that is going to be used for an AI application has been a major success in terms of how we're going to build this AI application by creating the data for that AI application. Another major challenge is when it comes to technology. I always say that the best AI projects are projects that is being led by business leaders or the decision maker, because he's going to bring his insights into the business and making sure that the AI project is aligned with the business strategy. Yet it's a two-edged sword. So in terms of, in case you had a business leader that did not have the understanding of the limitation of the technology. And I will bring you a story. So last week I was in London, and there was a TV commercial that has been on repeat on TV. And yes, I still see TV. This TV commercial, the catchphrase or their competitive advantage, they were an insurance company. They said, if you call our call center, it's going to be a human. So the mistake that some insurance company made in that organization by fully automating their call center with a conversational AI that, or a chatbot that did not have empathy or the ability to escalate to a human, has been an advantage for another industry that is saying, call us and a human will answer you. So always understand the limitation of the technology that you are having. For example, AI is very good when it comes to predicting millions possibilities in the future, or for example, detecting changes in images. But sometimes when it comes to human touch, to the empathy, we need to think of the technological challenges or limitation. Another thing, for example, how an agent would react in a 3D environment. A human is really good at it, but also we need to consider the challenges that we currently have in the IT. Elias have mentioned regarding scaling. So if it, for example, for the scaling, we are just focusing on MVPs or POCs without moving it into production, then this is just an interesting project. The last one is trust, where we need to ensure that the model that is in production is being trusted by the business users. Yeah. So based on these challenges that has been discussed by Elias and the one that we have shed some light into, we try to come up with a framework that is going to be used with our clients and how we help and build these AI use cases and products. And I think based on these challenges, you already have came up with some recommendation, like for example, we need to scale, we need to trust, but let's have it into a systematical methodology that it can be followed by the customer. For example, as you can see, the first stage, we have the assessment, where we need to understand what is the business challenge that we are trying to solve, what is the business priorities. As I mentioned, when you start an AI project, you don't want just to hire a bunch of data scientists and tell them, solve this problem for me. You need to bring the business to bring them the insight of what you are trying to solve. So understanding what is the challenge, understanding what is the vision that you want to have for AI, basically why AI. And one important aspect is what is the success metric that you want to use as well for your AI model. So once we had the challenges, the pain points, we had ideated some of the use cases, we want as well to define exactly what is the success metric that is going to be used for the data scientists and measuring the success of this AI model. As an example, we have been working on a use case where we were detecting garbage in the street. We built a model that was excellent in this detection, but the only problem is that this model was also detecting the garbage within the garbage bin, which is the good behavior that we want to have within the society. We only wanted to take the garbage outside of the garbage bin, but because we didn't explicitly mention exactly how we want the model or the outcome to be, or the good outcome, we had this mistake or this challenge of re-changing the label data. So in the first step, we assess, we understand, we prioritize the use cases, understanding what the organization currently have in terms of data and what data we can create, as we mentioned. And then we move into the solutions. And always my one of my brilliant leaders, he sometimes says that the solution that you're looking for is not even AI. So when we discuss with business what they are trying to achieve, they could just literally apply analytics on the database, and then they will get the result that they are expecting. So it's very important in the assessment we understand what they are trying to achieve, and then we start the solution. The solution could be AI, or it could be some other technology that they are looking for. So in the solutioning, we will define what kind of technology we require to build this use case. In most of the cases, it's more than one technology. It could be NLP, machine learning, and the other technologies that we have within the AI field. And then we move into unlocking the value itself. So once you have built this model, you want really to put it into work. You want to productionize it. You want your people or within the organization or the end user to start utilizing this application. And unlocking value requires having different tools. For example, tools that will help you with trust, with explainability, that will build the trust within the business. You require tools that will help you measure the feedback of this model, ensuring that is performing well in production. It also ensures we require some awareness, some enablement as well for the organization in order to adopt AI. And then we think of how we can sustain this model in terms of making it self-sustainable. So thinking from how we can move from cost center into a revenue center. How can this model generate revenue for the organization and be self-sustainable? And how can this organization sustain the value that they have gained with AI by being an AI-first organization, or adopting an AI operating model where we think of how we can scale AI within organization for multiple services and processes. And most importantly is that there is always enablement. And enablement, it could be for data, it could be around the regulation that we need to think of. So it is a systematical methodology that we have come up with, and we follow with our customer to unlock the value with AI. And I will leave it to you, Elias.
Thank you very much, Isa. Can you hear me? Thank you very much, Isa. That's very helpful. You know, us as our consultants, SCAI has its own methodology. There are many people who, and many organizations who do not. And the last 3, 4, 5 years, every time the phone was ringing at BCG, somebody was asking us, saying, I want to be AI first, or I want to be AI driven. How do I do this? So we ended up, you know, start talking to them about the what and the how. And the what starts the same way as Hisa described. You need to first to have a sense of the value of data. What is the art of the possible in your industry? If you're a telco company, or if you're a healthcare company, or if you are an oil and gas company, the value of data, the value of artificial intelligence is different. So you need to know how important it is for you. Then you need to know how to realize this value. You know, what are the macro use cases that you need to be? No need for very much detail, but you need to know that are going to work in this area, in that area, and in that area, and I hope that I will get that much out of this one and that much out of that one. Then you need to have a realistic roadmap. The number of our clients, of companies, of organizations who have called us and said, I want to become AI driven, and I want to become AI driven in the next 6 months. Good luck for that. It takes much more time. It takes time to prepare the entire organization, to build things, to train people, and so on and so forth. Then, exactly, you need to build the necessary capabilities. And the necessary capabilities we will discuss in a second. There is a trap here. We believe at BCG that you cannot start in a random order. You cannot start whenever you want. There is a very precise order in which you need to build your capabilities to work with this. First point. The second point is that you should try to make it use case driven. You don't need to build all the capabilities necessary at once. You need to build capabilities necessary to run your first few use cases, then the next wave of use cases, then the third wave of use cases. Without even understanding it, after a while, you will have everything you need without having gone through a tremendous effort that nobody understood why it was happening and considered bureaucratic. And once you have all this, only then you can implement effectively use cases. And as we will see in a second, implementing effectively use cases is by far not only data science. So that was the what. And what is the how? You have in this very colorful pyramid the AI capabilities model of the Boston Consulting Group. First thing first, it's a pyramid. It's not because we like the graphic, but because we are convinced that this needs to be thought of and executed top-down. And why it needs to be thought of and executed top-down? Because each layer informs the next one. So you need to start, of course, by having a vision, a strategy. Where do you want to go with this? Are you planning a radical transformation of your organization? Or are you perhaps try to transform the industry? Or you just want to make marginal changes in the way you're operating? Please don't get me wrong. Sometimes marginal changes in the way you're operating can produce billions, so it's not a bad thing. But it's a different scope that if you want to totally change your company. Once you know your vision, you can define what are the macro use cases you want to do. Do I want specific operational use cases that can be executed in 3 months? Can I go for something bigger? And so on and so forth. And once you have the use cases, only then you know how to analyze, how to organize your analytics group, especially for large organizations. Do I need a decentralized analytics group? Do I need a centralized one? Do I need a hub and spoke? You know, something in the center and something in divisions? Can I do it remotely? Can I do it in a multinational way? You need to know what are the use cases you have to execute to be able to answer most of these questions. And once you know the use cases and how your analytics is organized, only then you can start talking about data quality, how to break the silos, how I bring the data back, all the things that we put into data governance. And only when you know data governance, the analytics, and the use cases, you can decide what is the analytics infrastructure that you need. One of the most common mistakes we have seen in some of our clients is that they start at this level. They start at the analytics infrastructure. And why do they start there? Frankly, because it's easy. You call a vendor, you call IBM, well, they're next door. You call anybody, and you say, I want a 5 terabyte data lake. And of course, every vendor is very happy to send you to sell you a 5 terabyte database. You spend 2 years and $20 million, you have a 5 million terabyte, but this is not what you needed. It's a bit late. It's a bit late to discover. Can we do something for the mics? It's a bit late to discover after spending all this time and effort and money that it's not what you need. And once you know all these layers, you can decide and figure out what is strategic and core, and you need to develop inside and nurture, and what you can source from the ecosystem around you. And of course, in parallel to all this, there is a very important factor, which is change management. Even for digital native companies, this is very new. Change management needs to start from day one, and it's extremely important. Which leads me to the next thing, which is kind of the mantra of BCG Gamma. This is what we say. Probably we should tattoo it to every person who works for BCG Gamma. which is the 10-20-70 rule. To get impact from artificial intelligence, only 10% comes from the modeling. Only 10% comes from the algorithm. Of course, a very important 10%. If this 10% does not work, nothing else will work. But it's just 10%. 20% comes from the technologies around how do you deliver and how you work these algorithms. 70% comes from the people and the processes. How you build your capabilities, how you put the results of AI into the business processes, how you change the culture of the company to move towards decision making that is data driven, and how you overall you run your change management. There are two important so whats that come from this very simple page. The first one is relatively obvious. You can scale many times the 10%. You can scale many times the 20%. It's obvious that you cannot scale many times the 70%, which is a key factor of what I was telling you before, that you need to focus. Otherwise, you might have all the models of the world and all the applications of the world and all the proof of concepts of the world, but the organization will not be able to take it. That was the first so what. The second so what is that success in artificial intelligence, depending from people and processes, that means from management, from the normal management of the company. The success does not depend from data scientists, it does not depend from data engineers, it does not even depend from their bosses, it depends from the normal executives of the company who decide or not to go this way and to embrace this new way. That was a few things I wanted to tell you then. Perhaps I will pass it to Arnaud to give us some examples around all that.
Happy to do so, and I guess I will present things more from an investment angle, and I guess I'm going to be a bit disappointing by starting that I wish I knew what makes a startup successful. That would make my job much easier, and actually it's always a bet, right? But of course, over the course of years, we have identified a few things which we believe are conducive to success for startups. But before I enter into that, I just want to echo what has been said by both Isa and Elias. You need to know the limitations of AI. That's extremely important. AI cannot solve everything. Actually, we're just at the beginning of the story, of the match. There are things that are obvious and very easy for a human brain, which are extremely complicated and which will remain extremely complicated for an artificial intelligence, typically transfer learning, right? So I would say that AI learns very quickly. Today it learns at the speed of silicon. It will learn at the speed of quantum computing in a few years' time, but it still learns badly, right? Poorly. That's, I think, a limitation which is extremely important to bear in mind. Now, if I go back to investing, what we look at AIC are a few things. First of all, of course, we want deep technology. That's how we start. That's what we start our due diligence with. We want technological modes. We want a differentiating angle in the technology. But that is not enough, because as was rightly explained by Elias before, you have plenty of smart projects and smart technologies which do never scale. So what we are looking for in the teams we invest in are also a knowledge, a sectorial, a vertical knowledge and expertise. It's very important. So for us, the best companies are the companies which do combine deep tech AI approach, technology, and vertical expertise. Otherwise, it's always longer than expected to scale. Otherwise, you will be among your clients facing process issues, facing reluctance from existing players, etc., etc. So tech, sectorial, vertical expertise, and having identified a pain point. So the technology has to have a use case. It has to be there to fix a problem. And once you have these three, then it starts to look good. Of course, on top of that, and I'm saying on top of that, maybe it's the more important, you need a team and you need an entrepreneur or a few entrepreneurs who have a drive and who have a vision. And that's very much what we're looking at in the companies we invest in. So these are examples of some of the companies we invested in. I'm obviously not going to go through them one by one. I will give you a few examples of maybe the ones which have been the most successful and which do correspond to what I just explained. So typically, a UK-based company called Envelope. This company is doing insurance against cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a huge risk, a huge threat, and most insurance players have no clue, if you allow me the expression, have no clue how to fix that. And this company Envelope was created by people coming from the military backgrounds. Their job was to try to assess where ballistic missiles could fall, and that is based on very complex calculation, and that is based on a limited number of data, thank God. And they associated, they partnered with people coming from the insurance world, and they used this algorithmic approach that they had developed for ballistic missiles to assess and therefore to price the cybersecurity risk. And that's something that, again, insurance companies are really struggling to do. So they are really addressing a pain point, addressing an issue, which is that this risk is growing and no one knows how to price it. And by assessing it perfectly or much better than the others, of course, they are able to offer better prices. And what they do is that they partner with insurance companies which lend them their balance sheets because they know they cannot sell premiums, cybersecurity insurance premium themselves. So that's typically an example of this like dual approach, vertical and very deep tech. Another example I can give is a company called InstaDeep, which was funded by an impressive gentleman from Tunisia, Karim Beguir. He created the company. The company is based out of London, Paris, and Tunis. It's very deep learning. They developed a very deep technology, and then they struggled a bit to find the right vertical. And finally, they met with BioNTech, the famous biotech company out of Germany, and they really together decided to focus on that vertical. And what they do is really, really impressive. So they're using the AlphaFold database, which has been developed by DeepMind, to do drug discovery. But when I say drug discovery, it is not for small molecules. It is for proteins, so very complex molecules. And what they managed to achieve is really impressive, where before BioNTech needed maybe 1 year to try a new compound, they would need now 2 weeks. This is the order of magnitude we're talking about. So this is really a game changer for drug discovery. This really opens the way and the door for amazing developments in cancer treatments, etc., etc. They have also developed a system together with BioNTech called the early warning system, whereby they can identify extremely quickly if a new COVID variant is dangerous or not, or very dangerous or not. And they do that before the WHO manages to do so. So really, thanks to AI being applied to a vertical and having partnered with people who know this vertical inside out, they are really doing absolutely amazing things. A few other examples I could mention, still in the healthcare space, is a company, US company called Lark. What they do is personalized medicine. I'm personally convinced that the way we do medicine today, the way we treat patients today, would seem completely absurd in 20 or 30 years' time. Because today, medicine is hardly personalized. It's not based on data coming from the patients. It's based on other data, general data. And thanks to AI, you can really tailor the treatment to the patients. And that also applies to coaching. So you can gather a lot of data from the patients. Typically for LARC, we're talking about people who are suffering from hypertension or diabetes. And then thanks to a sensor, they do send out many data. And what LARC is doing is very much tailoring, giving them advice on what they should do, what they should eat, etc., based on all the data which are being gathered. This is quite impressive as well. There's another sector which I think is important, that I already hinted at, that's cybersecurity. I was explaining that cybersecurity is a growing threat, obviously, and the usual approach to cybersecurity, which is to compare new viruses to a library of existing viruses, doesn't work anymore, because in a single day you can have 1 million new viruses being created, right? So you completely need to transform the approach to cybersecurity, and that's what a few companies we invested in did. Typically a company called Reactor, which we sold to IBM a few weeks ago quite successfully, is doing that. Or another company called Deep Instinct is doing that. So instead of comparing new viruses to existing viruses, they do some sort of DNA analysis of new viruses and detect if they are dangerous or not. So this approach could not be followed without AI. And maybe a last sector I'd like to mention is intelligent robotics. Today in the world, human intelligence is still used for very stupid things, typically warehouses. I'm convinced that there are better uses for human intelligence than bringing and handling packages in a warehouse. Today, thanks to AI, you can add a layer to robots to make them intelligent so they can learn new tasks. And there's this company, for example, called Photoneo, which is based in Slovakia, in Europe, which has completely fully automated fulfillment centers. And that is addressing a pain point, which is that you don't find people today who are really willing to work in warehouses. So you need to find alternatives to that, and frankly, that's for the good of humankind. So these are just a few examples of companies we invested in, companies which have been successful financially, and they have been successful financially because they do address a real problem. Tech, just for the sake of tech, doesn't work. Tech for the sake of fixing issues and helping people does work. Well, actually, I have already addressed most of these. Train scheduling, these are use cases. Intelligent robotics, I mentioned it. Cybersecurity, I mentioned it. Train scheduling, that's a real problem. And it sounds a bit obvious, but rescheduling trains when there's a late train, typically in train networks in Europe, which are extremely dense, is a nightmare. That's something that the human brain cannot do efficiently. That's a typical use of AI, and that's a typical problem that they're trying to address. I mentioned LARC, I mentioned InstaDeep. The last company I should mention is AI Doc, because in healthcare, I would say that you have three main baskets that can be addressed thanks to AI. You have drug discovery, I mentioned that for small molecule and for protein. X37 is small molecules, InstaDeep is proteins. You have personalized medicine, I addressed that. But you also have computer vision applied to radiology. These guys at AI Doc, I visited a hospital where the technology is being used. And there was a random guy who was there, and we asked him, okay, does it work? And his answer was, it saves lives. That does save lives, right? Because where it took maybe a few hours before to analyze a radio, a scan, now it's done in a few seconds. And if this system is embedded into the tool of the hospital, then it goes directly to the right doctor who is being alerted and can react quickly. So this is, there again, a game changer. These guys, they have 12 FDA licenses in the US. It's a leader in the space of AI-enabled radiology. there are many players in that space. These are scaling. And another field I'd like to mention, besides scans, are pathology, right? So using computer vision in pathology, both for research and for treatments, is also very promising. So that's I guess, the next step. And last vertical I'd like to address is security. These are US companies. There are a few issues linked to security in the US, starting with the fact that there are quite a few weapons detained by people. What Lassen Peak does is, from a distance, to analyze. It's a device, right, handheld device, that a policeman can use to detect if a person a few meters away has or not a weapon, right? And in the US context of very tense relationship between the police and some parts of the population, that is really a game changer. That's something that police force in the US and in Europe are very keen on getting, this new device. Another example that's computer vision is Zero Eyes. This is for identifying shooters arriving in a facility, right? In a school, in any public building. So you have videos, you have plenty of cameras in the US, but what is complicated is to have a person behind the video, behind the screen, looking at it permanently with the necessary attention to be able to react quickly. And experience shows that it's not the case, right? People have attention drops. Machines do not have attention drops, right? So instead of having someone, or on top of having someone behind the screen, there is an artificial intelligence which is screening the videos and identifying if there is a threat, an attack, or someone coming in with a weapon. So there again, AI is a game changer. So just to summarize what I said, you need a deep tech, you need the pain points that you address, you need as an entrepreneur to know the vertical, to know the buyers, to know the clients inside out. And when you have that, and when you are fixing a problem, then you are successful.
Thank you very much, Arnaud. Hello? Thank you very much, Arnaud. So, ladies and gentlemen, we try to show you a few examples of use cases that work and they have impact. The way investors think about companies who realize these use cases. Then we also show with HISA the framework that a specific company applies to make AI effectively. And we also discussed the higher level framework of the Boston Consulting Group of how to implement and how to build AI-related capabilities. So I would like to finish with our mantra, the 10-20-70. It's easy, please always remember it. Success in AI is 10% the algorithm, 20% the tech, and 70% you. So please keep it in mind. I'll open the floor to questions. We have another 10 minutes. So if there are any questions. Yes, madam. We need to get them. The lady over there.
Thank you very much for this insightful presentation.
Can you speak up a bit?
Thank you very much for this insightful presentation. And I have just a question from the perspective of an investor. How do you see use cases that are a little bit has a certain liabilities? For example, you have identifying shooters that might trigger some legal aspects. Or, for example, applying AI on something where there is safety critical issues, such as train scheduling. How do you approach investing in such hazardous business, if you would like to call it so? Thank you very much.
I need to rephrase because I'm not sure I catch everything. How to approach what exactly?
Investing in use cases that are a little bit, that present certain liabilities. For example, having safety critical issues, medical issues, insurance, missile.
Lisa would like to take it? Or?
For sure. So I believe the question is regarding how can we manage the risk of the AI use cases. So maybe I will add some insights regarding tackling how we're going to approach these use cases from ideation and also from execution, and maybe Arnold as well in terms of investment, in terms of how he make that risk assessment. But usually, as we mentioned in the elevation framework, in the understand stage where we need to assess the use case, and a huge part of it is assessing the risk of that use case in terms of safety, in terms of ethical issues, in terms of privacy. A lot of use cases, sometimes it's critical even for humans, like for example in the healthcare, where if you use it, for example, for predicting breast cancer, let's give it as one of the examples, and you misdiagnose a patient that they don't have this tumor while they do have it, then this is a major risk that could affect the life of someone. So that's why it's important in the beginning of any use case to list all of the risk that you see regarding the safety, regarding the ethicals, and try to put procedures to mitigate this risk. So for example, in terms of the safety, you could adjust the confidence or the threshold of this model. For example, you're fine if you're going to predict, let's say, more patients being diagnosed with cancer than having your model being biased on the other side, where you clear one patient while they do have some cancer. So it depends on the use case and how you need to have some policies and procedures in place for it. One other part maybe you have mentioned, if I heard you well, is regarding the ethical domain, and this is where you need to connect with the regulator in terms of, for example, here in Saudi, the data regulator, NDMO, and also the AI and Data Authority, SCAI, where you need to connect and understand with them the regulation that they have in terms of the AI use in a specific use case, or for example, in the data domain. Another one is regarding the industry regulation. So even in telecommunication and healthcare, you need to connect with the regulator and understand the current policies that you have, and you need to implement and impose in your model as well. So I hope I have answered your question, and maybe if Arnold have
some... If I may add something, there is an entire body of research and of work around the risk of use cases and what we call responsible AI. And as Hisa very rightly said, there are two dimensions. The first one is the risk per se. I'll get back to that. And the other one is the ethical part. And the ethical part is an entire, I mean, we can spend 3 days discussing about this. On the risk part, the way we see it is how much power do we give to the computer? How much power do we give to the algorithm? What level of decision? It can be nothing, so the algorithm just gives you a result, you look at it, but you take the decision, the human takes the decision, all the way to the automated decision. And how do you decide with this? We see it in two axes. The first one, try to imagine a matrix. Unfortunately, I cannot draw it here. One is how many people you affect. It goes from one person to the entire humanity, 7.5 billion people. The other axis is what is the importance of the impact. It could be just that you give him a fine of $10, or all the way to you kill him. So across this matrix there is a diagonal. If you create a harm very small, but you create it to 100 million people, you cannot let the algorithm decide by itself. If you create a harm only to one people, but it's terminal, you kill this person, of course you cannot let the computer decide. Of course, I'm oversimplifying here because this is just the basic of the reasoning, and then behind you have another 25 dimensions, but this is how you think about those kind of things. Does this answer your question? Okay, thank you.
Maybe just to no, sure. Just to complement, we have a bit changed our approach about that at AIC. It's a very important question, obviously. when we started 4 years ago, we thought that we would shy away from sectors which are too regulated because we saw that as an impediment, an hindrance to scaling, right? So we thought that we would most likely not invest in self-driving cars because the problem with self-driving cars is today less the technology than the governance and the fact that these technologies are accepted or not. We thought as well that we would shy away from investing in healthcare for the same reason, because it's very regulated and potentially dangerous. And we have changed our mind. Healthcare has become one of the verticals in which we invest most. Why? Because the advantage that AI brings are so huge that you have to overcome these problems and find an issue, right? Find a solution to these problems. And typically, the FDA in the US or its equivalent in Europe are today quite keen on these new technologies. So where we were thinking 4 years ago that regulators would be reluctant, what we see is that actually they are quite willing to have these technologies being introduced because, again, they are a game changer.
Any other question? Yes. The gentleman over there, and then I'll come to you.
Thank you so much for the very interesting conversations here. My name is Martin Sabek, TÜV Süd. I'm coming from a TIC company, Testing, Inspection, Certification. So we actually help our clients to reach conformance assessment of artificial intelligence. And what you're actually talking is very true. The biggest struggle for organizations is to reach the quality of artificial intelligence. Under quality, we usually lump everything from safety, security, conformance, legal, ethics, the stakeholder satisfaction that need to be there in the end. Now, quality where you don't meet your return of investment, one category of customers. The other one is that need market entry in highly regulated spaces. You have now presented a couple of frameworks to guide them. Totally agree. Frameworks to help organizations are very essential, and a lot of people are not aware of all the things that are coming towards them. So question, the international community has reached consensus on how to do it, right? There is a governance aspect, life cycle processes mitigation, process assessments, plus technical assessments that need to be done. Neuron coverage and so forth, what can be measured. All of this is now being standardized. In the ISO SC42, they have laid out exactly what needs to be done. To what degree are the frameworks that you have presented already aligned with those standardization efforts?
I don't remember, I think it was Henry Paulson who said, you know, the ex-head of Goldman Sachs and Secretary of Finance in the US, that regulation runs always behind practice. So the direct answer to your question is no, but simply because this kind of frameworks and applications exists now since years and regulation comes only now. So so there will be eventually aligned, but and we work with both the European and the American regulatory body to help them think through that. So but for now they are not aligned. Somebody wants to, okay. Perhaps the gentleman in the back. In the back, no.
Thank you very much. I want to build upon the previous question and further down the conversation on AI governance. I lead a small think and do tank that really specializes on AI governance. So here, interestingly, we have different perspectives. The investor perspective, the developer/deployer perspective. So the question is more around how early in the investment life cycle are you going to bake impacts of returns on investment driven by liabilities and risks? We've talked about explainability problems, particularly in safety critical context. So how early are these problems and the impending regulation meaningful to you? And it is it meaningful now, or will we have to wait for the regulation and or standards or codes of conduct to be passed for investment decisions to be impacted? Thank you.
Arnaud, you want to take this? Or?
Yes, I can try. The simple answer, or the short answer, not the simple answer, the short answer is early, or as early as possible, when it's possible. We always, when we look at a market, obviously, because we look at markets, that's important. We do not only look at technologies, we look at markets. And regulation is obviously part of the market assessment, right? Because regulation can be a hindrance, can be an opportunity as well, right? So the short answer to your question is, this is very important in our assessments. It comes quite quickly. Of course, the issue here is that we are a global fund. We do invest all over the planet. And by the way, the beauty of AI is that it's not capital intensive. So you can have great AI companies, great AI ideas coming up from smaller countries, even when there's not a lot of capital. So we are facing regulations which are not the same in China, in the US, and in Europe, right? So each time you obviously need to look into the local regulations and to take that into account when you envisage the scaling of the companies. Because typically in Europe, you would have companies which are very focused on explainable AI, and that would less be the case in other geographies, right? So again, to answer your question, regulation is key, has to be looked at early on, and it's fully part of the investment decision.
The gentleman in the middle. Over there. No, on the other side.
Hello, this is Syed. I am representing Digital Corporation.
Can you speak up a bit?
Under the Ministry of Communication and Information Technology. Thank you very much. We learn a lot from your sessions. My question is that your theme is unlocking value with AI. Definitely we know that AI, the main fuel of AI is data, and the data, in collecting data, refining data is a challenge for even in the developed country, but particularly for the developing countries. Maybe my question is not 100% relevant to your topic, but how we keep this theme, unlocking value with AI, the countries who are underserved, unserved, basically. They are struggling towards ICT only. Thank you very much.
Do you want to take this?
So honestly, so I think you're talking about technological inclusive. How can we ensure that underserved groups or countries, they get the same benefit and advantage that the neighbor countries are having, for example. And maybe I would just reflect on His Excellency Abdullah Swaha when he was in the World Economic Forum, where he addressed the inclusive subject specifically for technology, including AI. So how can we ensure the different groups or the unserved groups, also the neighbor countries that is unserved in terms of resources, access to educational programs, and also in terms of access to the resources. So Saudi is already having multiple programs when it comes in how can we have the same, let's say, benefits or advantage for these unserved groups. So I hope I tried to answer your question, but I'm not the expert in this topic.
So perhaps a last question. We have 2 minutes left. Yes, madam.
You mentioned something about if the sensors, for example, if in the POC stage they actually succeeded, but then you went to trial or you went to production, and then the data that came from the sensors did not result in accurate predictions. How do you overcome this problem, and how do you predict this problem before it happens, before you invest your your money in AI, and then you realize that the sensors are not giving accurate data?
I'll let Arnaud reply this, but I'm a bit afraid that if we knew how to predict a problem before we invest into the area, we will all be rich. But unfortunately, there is no way to predict. As Arnaud explained, and we help a lot of investors invest into AI. There is a certain areas of things that, of elements, a certain number of elements that you look before investing. And one of this is the technology, and if a sensor of a specific technology works or not. You cannot assess it. You cannot assess it totally, because at the moment you're taking the investment decision, you probably have just a prototype, but you try to see how this prototype will evolve and scale. Does it always work? Definitely not. Otherwise, we will all be millionaires, So, but I don't know if you have to add something on this. Does this answer your question, or? Okay. Well, what other element are you missing?
So if we're trying to resolve a problem and we're implementing AI solution to resolve this problem, and then we tried to train the model using the sensor data, and they didn't work, how do you tackle this issue? Because eventually you do want to resolve the problem and you do want to better use AI.
Wow.
I'm sorry, I need
Yeah.
to get the...
Yeah, please.
I'm not sure. Okay, this is working. I think it's working.
It is working, yes.
Oh.
It is working. That's great at the end of the session. So I think this will go back to my topic regarding the data creation instead of the data extraction. So you need to go back to the data sources and fix the equipment. So that one solution that we have tackled, for example, in the case that I mentioned, is that we had to bring an equipment that we could rely on, and we focus on how we create this data and have a proper or robust data quality process in place.
That's it. Thank you very much we run out of time. Thank you very much for your attention, and I understand that we are between you and your lunch, so
Thank
enjoy
you
your
very
lunch.
much, everyone. Thank you.